we're going to go to Acts 22 now. This is the first time that Paul repeats his message that he got from God. Now, when he got it from God, it was his reference point for the rest of his life. See, when you get born again and God talks to you, it's usually a reference point. Now, Paul didn't know what all was going to happen, but his reference point was he had an experience with God that he never forgot. Paul wants to tell these people. Now remember, these people are religious people. Okay? He's going to Israel. He went to his own. Okay? Really, it didn't work out at all. They got upset with him. Verse 15 says, "For thou shalt be a witness unto all men what thou hast seen and heard." See, what he's seen and what he heard was going to be the platform for his life and his ministry. And I'm challenging you to ask yourself, what have I seen and heard that is my reference point for what I'm going to do? Some of you may have heard it years ago, gone away from God and have come back, and if you ask him, he'll remind you of what he said in the first place. Because God usually says in the first place what he wants done. So, we'll go down to verse 18. He told him about his vision and his experience with God. And this is the Lord's answer in verse 18. "And saw him saying unto me, Make haste and get thee quickly out of Jerusalem." Get out of town, boy. How do you like that? "For they will not receive thy testimony concerning me." Okay? Paul had his experience, but was he going to the right people? See, we're all sent to a group of people. Paul said, "I'm all things to all men that I might win some." But that took a while to learn. But he had an assignment to the Gentiles. Period. And how many of you witnessed the wrong people and got run out of town on a rail? When I was young, I told you, I talked to everything. Everybody and everything. I talked about God all the time. I made half of them mad, some of them glad, got some of them saved. But I certainly could do a better job because I know better on some things now. But then I had so much excitement because I had no life without God that when I got one, I couldn't shut up. And I talked to people all the time. And I couldn't wait to tell them about Jesus because I realized I didn't know anything about the Bible, but I knew I passed from death to life. I remember reading in the book of John in the Catholic Church over there in Westover while Father Patsy I. Quinn is preaching, and I'm born again, sitting in that Catholic church, and I'm reading them scriptures in John that I have everlasting life, period. I could see in John, the book of John, that I got everlasting life, and then I thought about all the people that I buried, and I thought about all the stuff that went on, and I got to understanding of how things work, sitting right there in that church service. I could see that I literally passed from death to life. I was a condemned man with a death sentence, and when I got born again, I could feel the freedom of my new life. I probably had as much baggage as anybody, but I had freedom inside of me somewhere that God was going to gradually work out and permeate to the edges of my being. It had to start in the inside, and it just kept working away at me and working away at me. And I'm still being worked on every day, but it's kind of like being I say all your transformation comes from the inside out. It doesn't come from the outside in. The information comes from the outside in, goes down in your heart, but your transformation comes out of your heart. Behavior won't fix a thing, but a transformed heart changes your nature. Okay? So they run him out of town on a rail, pretty much. And he said, he's talking to Jesus. This is so cool, as if Jesus didn't know, but he's telling him. He said, "Lord, they know." Do you talk to God like this? Do you ever just talk to God just like what was plain as day? This works. This is real relationship. You can be as plain as you want, and it don't bother Jesus. He says, "Lord, they know that I imprisoned and beat in every synagogue them that believed in you, that believed in you." He's telling Jesus, I beat up everybody that believed in you. What a conversation. And when the blood of thy martyr Stephen was shed, I was standing there watching, consented to it. See, this guy knew what he was, and he didn't mind saying it. That's why he had a line of demarcation, because he knew that's who he was. When you can't talk about your past, you really don't have nothing to say, because there has to be something that you were and you became. You're supposed to be able to talk about your past with freedom. We like to tuck it away because we don't like to let anybody know that's who we were. Now remember, you don't run around out and cast all your pearls before swine, but there are people that need to hear your story. And the better you get at telling it, the wider your platform gets. The more people you can influence. He says, I was standing by and consenting unto his death, and held their clothes while they did it. And then Jesus answers him again. Depart, for I will send thee far hence unto the Gentiles. In other words, I got a market for you, Paul. I know you did these things. He's telling him, how am I going to, what he's saying is, how am I going to witness to people that know I was beating everybody up? You know, that there's areas you'll never have influence in. There are areas you'll never have influence in. That's why your family has a hard time with you, because they know your history. Sometimes you got to pray somebody else talks to them, because they know your history. They can't. If they're not born again, they can't see the difference between the old guy and the new guy. They just think you're a hypocrite, a liar, and a fake. All they can remember is what you were, because they don't know where your line of demarcation is, because if they're not born again, they don't have one. They've never touched it, never seen it, they've never smelled it. They don't know where it is. So, he sends him somewhere else. Now this is what they did to him. They gave him audience unto the word, and then lifted up their voices and said, away with such a fellow from the earth, for it is not fit for him to live. That's good. That's what you call a threat. And they cried out and cast off their clothes. They stripped their clothes off, started throwing dirt in the air. They were so mad. Paul did get some reactions, didn't he? People ripping their clothes off and throwing dirt at him, saying he should be killed, and threw dust in the air. So the first attempt, see, this is what you have to learn, and don't you think I'm losing my mind. I truly believe in failure. I can hardly stand it when nobody fails, because I don't know how they learned. Like, Paul did something. Paul was a doer. Doers do things right. Doers do things wrong. But he loved God enough to take a swing at it and go to people and try to tell them about his experience. And it didn't work. God had to save him, told him to get out of town, they're going to kill you. And he says, I got a market for you. I'll send you to them. Now see, if you were afraid of what you look like, you'd have been afraid of failing, you'd have never took a swing, and you'd have never learned who you're sent to. Can you see how everything is in stages in your life? Get up and go here, and then you'll know the next step. And he let him go to those Pharisees, and they just wanted to kill him because they couldn't stand it, because they were one of those people. How many of you tried to go back and convince all your old drinking buddies or whoever you hung out with that you got born again and you got about this much success out of it? And the only thing he wanted you to do was come back and drink with him. There's places you just can't go back to. It's not that you don't love them, you just can't go do it. They're not going to receive you. They're not in the same position you are. Believe me, I got so excited when I got born again, I couldn't stop telling people. I had a lot of trial and error. A lot of pain was involved with the trial and error. I'll say one thing, though. It built some resilience and some strength in me to keep swinging. It just was a very painful lesson. I'd like to say I did benefit through it all, but some of it was pretty hurtful. But later on in life, I can tell you, several of them got born again later on in their lives. So, now, okay, that was his first attempt. Remember, Luke told his story the first time. That's the second time when he told it. Now he's going to have a third account. He's in the right place with the right people, the people He sent to. We're in Acts 26 now, verses 1 and 2. Please never be afraid to fail. Be more afraid of doing nothing. Doing nothing is probably the most deadly thing you could ever do with your life, is be paralyzed because you're afraid of failing or afraid of what people think. It doesn't give you a right to go out and be stupid. I do think you're supposed to vet yourself. I think you're supposed to study what you're trying to do, think about it, pray about it, and meditate with God, figure out, you're still going to mess up some things, but it's still better than doing nothing. This is so great. Paul says, then Agrippa, I'm in verse 26:1. Then Agrippa said unto Paul, thou art permitted to speak. I think that was a prophetic statement for him. Now you can talk, Paul. You're in the right place, Paul. I'm going to have you speak here. He says, I'm going to send you before the Gentiles. Now, he didn't know he was going this way. You notice he had to defend himself a lot. Paul had a lot of defending of himself to do, because he penetrated in the kingdom of darkness. You know how you can tell when you start having a lot of trouble because you start going into the kingdom of darkness and the devil starts throwing fits? It's not a time to withdraw. It's actually a time to be glad you finally hit pay dirt. It's kind of like when you start doing business, when you start a business, and you finally start getting to where it's working, and you see how much, your love is, when you see how much responsibility it is and how much it's going to cost you and how hard it is to get people and all the taxes you got to pay and the workman's comp and the Social Security and the insurance and the building payment and the fees for whatever business you're in, you finally realize what it costs and you go, whoa, I didn't know it was like this. Okay? But that's when you start to make money, when you actually figure out what you're doing. It almost takes that to where you got to get in to figure it out. See, some things you got to get into. Marriage was one of those, wasn't it? Did you have to get married to figure it out what marriage was? I bet you did. I bet you were surprised too. That's a big revelation when you get married. You think it's going to be one way and you find out it's totally something else. That's life. If you knew what it was, you probably wouldn't have done it. If Paul knew the guys all knew they were going to be martyred, they probably wouldn't have done that either. So God just leads them in steps. Then Paul stretched forth his hand and answered for himself, I think myself happy. King Agrippa, I shall answer for myself this day before thee, touching all the things whereof I am accused of the Jews. This guy says, I'm finally going to get to talk, and he gave me the authority to talk, and that means they're going to let me tell my story. How many of you like to be able to tell your story? How many of you tried to tell it where it didn't fit and got all the beat up? He's finally in the right place. So he talks about his childhood, okay? Then he talks about how, again, he recaps his evil thinking. How many of you can recap your evil thinking when you get an opportunity to speak to a king? No reputation. The Bible says, make yourself of no reputation. See, you're not wanting you to look good. You're wanting Jesus to look good because you really want to marry them to Him and not you. If you look too good, you'll steal some of the limelight and it'll go your way. They might not get born again. But if you let Him have it all, He can handle it. You don't have to look good. You have to be right. Okay. I did in Jerusalem I'm in verse 10. And many of the saints did I shut up in prison. I received authority from this guy said, I went and got authority where they were put to death. Boy, what a thing to think about yourself. You talk about being ashamed of yourself. I'd want that not to be known too. I'm not sure I could do what he just did, but he did it. I used to kill people. What'd you do? I killed Christians. Put them in jail. That's what I was. Christian killer, and jailed them. And I abused them. Just took them out of their houses and synagogues. Just took them straight there and put them in prison. I punished them often in every synagogue and compelled them to blaspheme. I don't know Him. I'll beat you to death if you don't deny Him. And being exceedingly mad against them, I persecuted them, even unto strange cities. Then he tells his experience on his way to Damascus. This is his reference point for his new life. What is your reference point for your new life? I'm telling you this today because I want you to think about where it is in your history. Because therein is your strength to live for God. That experience when you said, I'll do anything you say at an altar call. That experience where you were in prayer and you said, you promised God anything. Okay, I'll tell him. I said this before. I'll tell it. It's just the best story I got. Rena gave me a word in 91, and he said to me, she's prophesying middle night, 1:30 in the morning, 1 o'clock. She's saying that God said that because you said you would, He's going to take you up on your offer. I promised that to God in my prayer life that my wife did not know about. I said, God, I'll do anything you ask. Years later, she prophesies to me and says, God says that He's going to take you up on your offer. He says it's going to be hard on your personality, but the hour is late, but because you said you would, He's going to use you in these last days. You think God don't record all them commitments you made that nobody knows about in your heart? He does. And He'll bring them up. He'll bring them up to you. He'll say, you said you were going to do this, and you didn't do it. But He was reminding me of what I told Him when I was wanting to please Him. We've all had things we promised God. But He remembered it. Remember, there's a book of remembrance with all your stuff in it. So anyway, he goes on to tell him how he persecuted the church. And he said, Saul, why do you persecute me? It's hard for you to kick against the pricks. Verse 16, he said, but rise and stand upon thy feet, for I have appeared unto thee for this purpose. See, God's going to give him his purpose. To make thee a minister, one purpose, and a witness of these things which thou hast seen, and those things in which I do appear to thee. Now, what you saw and heard, yourself is going to be your witness. It's what God did for you is where your witness comes from. That's why we don't like to witness. We might not be living in what we promised Him. The power to be a witness is the power that you have when you said yes and you do it. Then you can witness properly, unashamedly. Because see, your commitment is to Him, and you remember that. Now, then he talks, he says, delivering them. Now, this is what's going to happen when you do this, Paul. He's giving him what his assignment is, what it's going to be, and now what it's going to do. Delivering them people, and I'm going to look up there. I got tears in my eyes half time. The people as well as from the Gentiles whom I send you. In other words, you're going to the Gentiles and you're going to deliver you from Jewish people as well as the Gentiles. You're not going to be harmed. In other words, I'm sending you to people groups, mostly Gentiles, but they're not going to hurt you, and you're going to get to do this. Keep going, 13. To open their eyes in order to turn them from darkness to light. So He's going to cause spiritual blindness to be removed. What a calling. And turn from the power of Satan to the power of God. They're going to switch kingdoms, Paul, because you're going to do what I tell you. That they may receive forgiveness of their sins and inheritance. So He's going to get these people forgiven from their sins, and their lives are going to improve, and they're going to get inheritance from God. You talk about a job description. How many of you would like to have that job description? You've got to take the other stuff that comes with it. He had a great privilege because he was going to transfer people from one kingdom to another. What a job description. It took a lot of suffering to get it done. Now here's how important your first commitment was. That's why he says go back to your first love. Don't flinch, nobody will know, but some of you got to go back to your first love. He says repent. Do it over again and go back to your first love. Go back to your foundation. The things you promised me. This is one advantage that Paul had. He said, whereupon, O Agrippa, verse 19, I was not disobedient unto the heavenly vision. Through all the persecution, through all of the stuff, he had that vision so ingrained in him, and he would not disobey. No matter how much pressure came from the outside, he was not going to lose his integrity. Do you know you can lose your riches, you can lose your wife, you can lose your cars, you can lose your health, but you don't have to lose your integrity. Your integrity, the Bible says a man's integrity is what guides him. The honesty you are with yourself is how you take your next step. A man's integrity shall guide him. It tells you what step to take next. And if you lie to yourself, you don't get where you need to go. If you tell yourself something so you can go do what you want to do, you have just gotten off the trail. Okay, I'll tell him that one too. Boy, he's on it today. This one time, I had a dream that I was on this four-wheeler, and I went down a gravel road and went to a house. And a person I knew was in there, and they were disobedient. Okay? This is how God deals with me. When I tell you He just constantly corrected me, He does. And I looked up and I said, what are you doing? Oh, she says to me, what are you doing here? And she was a disobedient person. In other words, I didn't belong there. I went down to the road of the gravel road to the disobedient house, and she was in it. And she looks at me and goes, what are you doing here? In other words, you don't belong here. I needed to go get back where I was. I was being disobedient and took a wrong road. How do you like that for protection? That's how God is about keeping you on the right track. I was offended and mad, so I went down the wrong road. She goes, what are you doing here? I'm asking you this morning, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? Anyway, so God has a road to keep you on. And Paul stayed on it and said, I'm not disobedient to the heavenly vision. In other words, his purpose. When did God visit you, and what did He tell you when you met Him? That's where your strength is from. Now, I will tell you this. Because of media and all the insecurities of people and always feeling behind, and this one's greater than you, and you got to do what they got to do, and everybody wanted to be everybody once. We all had stars, and everybody wanted to be a football player. Everybody wanted to be Kenneth Copeland that liked him. Everybody wanted to be Kenneth Hagin. Everybody wants to be this preacher. Everybody wants to be that ball player. Everybody wants to be this or that. What we're talking about comes from inside of you after God told you what you're supposed to be. You can't get any of your identities from any of those people. Your identity only comes from one place, and that's God. And you have to go back and examine, what did He tell you? And that, what He told you, will create all your confrontations, all your victories, all the devils being defeated, and your character changing. Because when you start going after what He said you were supposed to, you run into all of them. I always tell people, don't ever go looking for the devil. Obey God, you'll find him. You ain't got to go look for no demons. Just do what you're supposed to do. And you go, oh, I didn't know he was there. I didn't know that was in him. You'll find your battles by obedience. But you'll find your victories by obedience. You'll find your character changes. Now listen, that's why I'm going to touch a sacred cow. That's why the only thing, well, if I just be nice, and I just try to treat people good, and I try to do everything right, my life's going to be okay. Biggest lie you ever heard. That's the one that makes you passive and put up with hell and thinking it's going to get better. You have to speak to hell. You have to command it to go in the name of Jesus. You have to speak to the devils that run your life that you can't stand, that you tolerate, thinking if you're nice enough, it'll change. Devil don't care about nice. He'll nicely steal all your stuff while you're thinking if you do everything just a certain way, it's going to be okay. No, it's not. You have to be a person of confrontation and face all your fears. And I'm going to tell you something. God will line them up in the perfect order to make you mature. Don't go attacking the big ones. Ask God what to do, like Paul said. What do I do? He started out with a what I do, and God set up the course of training to defeat this one, and this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. Now, if you skip and go out here, you'll probably get beat up and settle for religion over here. And you'll just live real religious, go to church, and everything's okay. But I don't confront no demons now. I don't do that. I just live in peaceful. You're peaceful, but you're powerless. He said, take dominion. So how can you take dominion without a confrontation? You must confront demonic power, but not just because you're a Christian and you have authority over all devils. That is not true. You live your life and you fight the ones that get in front of you. You don't fight everybody's devil and you don't fight every devil. You deal with the ones that are in front of you. Your life will take you right, and you'll have victory. In the Old Testament, God had them go a different way, because if they ran into the wrong enemy, they would have went back. He made sure that He set up the order of the fights. He set up the right order so you could win. Let's stand to our feet. I'm telling you this morning, God is setting you up for a win, but He has a road for you to go on that will make you a winner. He'll make you a winner, people. He knows how to make winners. You don't pick your battles, God does. You know, I can say this about any ministry you want. Don't be offended. I'm just saying. I believe in right to life and the people who fight abortion and everything. I do, 100%. But that don't mean I got to get in it. I might believe in feeding hungry people. That don't mean I got to get in. How many can you get in anyway? How many fights can you pick at one time? Your goal is to find out what the vision was for God had for you and do it, because you'll be all over the place if you don't. And you'll give about 5% to all of them, and you'll feel like your life was wasted and you didn't get nothing done.